Everybody's been waiting. So excited, waiting for Teams to come out into the government tenant. Congratulations, folks. You've got it. Now the question is, what does it do? How can I leverage it? And how does it compare to the other collaboration tools that Microsoft offers to us in the Office 365 M365 stack? During this session, led by Jen Mason, our Director of Innovation at Planet Technologies, we're going to discuss Teams, Planner, SharePoint, my oh my. Simple and easy collaboration using SharePoint. Jen?
All right, hello everybody. We're going to take a few minutes and talk about just some simple and easy collaboration we can do within Office 365. There's a lot of things that come out of the box, and there's a lot of really great functionality and power that we have with little to no configuration. This means that your users are able to quickly and easy use the tools. So we spent a lot of time in the sessions this week talking about all the prep work we have to do to get the environments ready, all the powerful things we can do from an infrastructure and admin side, even security. Now we want to talk about a little bit of how simple it can be to use things out of the box and just the direct power that can impact the day-to-day lives of your users. So going into it, we're going to talk about three different things. We're going to talk about Teams, Planner, and SharePoint. Now, a lot of people will ask me, especially with Teams just coming to the GovCloud, do I need to use Teams? Can I just use SharePoint? Can I just use Outlook tasks to manage my task? There's a problem and a benefit and an opportunity, I guess we'd say, inside of the Office 365 stack is there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. So you can collaborate in a lot of different ways using a lot of different tools. But when we pull them all together, we really find out that we are really just trying to make our users' lives easier. We're trying to get them to use the technology with one goal. So we want them to be able to work together quickly, easily, always be able to find the single source of truth without really having to do a lot of effort to do that. So when we're going to look at that in this new modern experience, there's more than one way to do it, but pulling them all together, you're going to get the best overall experience. So Microsoft Teams, a lot of times you'll hear it say that it's the hero experience. And so what that means is it's a single entry point to everything inside of Office 365. You can have threaded conversations. Skype for Business is going to be moving into Teams. We're going to learn all about, what's coming with that and what that looks like longer term. We're still learning pieces as we go. But we're going to be able to have groups of people coming together, collaborating and sharing content. But really, at the end of the day, that's also powered by the other tools that are available inside of Office 365. So for instance, if I'm sharing documents inside of Teams, I'm actually storing them inside of a SharePoint document library. So whether I'm going directly to the SharePoint site and accessing my contents, or I'm working with it in Teams, I'm really working with the same content. What this allows us to do is have multiple entry points for the same pieces of data, allowing users to have the experience that works best for them, that's going to make them the most efficient. So we also have Microsoft Planner, which is a great tool that's going to allow us to manage tasks and project plans and different things like that. Again, I can access that directly going into the Planner Hub. I can access that in Teams. I can also access that inside of SharePoint. But it's one single list that I'm using, accessing it in multiple locations. And the same thing with SharePoint. All the classic things we love about SharePoint, being able to store documents, being able to manage content, being able to share news and share different items with our teams and keep people informed and engaged, that's all still done inside of SharePoint, but surfaced inside of Teams. So very easy to access and get the information that we're looking for. So we're going to take a few minutes now. I'm going to do a demo of all of these different environments and show you some of the really simple things that we can do just using Office 365 out of the box. So what you see here is my Office 365 landing page. You're going to see a summary of some of the news that we have. These are all the news articles that have been shared with me across the organization rolling up here. I can use the waffle and I can go to my different applications. I have some of them already opened inside of different tabs. So I'm going to start out and go into Teams. What I have here is a team created called GovCloud Summit Demo. This is a demo site that I've created to use as an example. This is out of the box. I've done nothing to customize this. I've simply used the elements that are available to me. What we see here is we have a Conversations tab. All the items across the top are called tabs. And under each different team, I can have different channels so I can subclassify content. So I may have a large group and then I want to have a subgroup inside of it. I could create a channel and then organize my content. So inside of this channel here, I have conversations. we can see that I'm having different conversations with the team. We have a little bit of fun. Teams is a very open and fun experience, so people can use emojis and add emoticons and stuff like that. Of course, what's the number one question I get asked about that is, can I turn it off? And the answer is yes, you can go into your tenant and turn that off, but you can also leave it on within guidelines and regulations and allow your team to do that. We can also share documents. When I come up here and I open a document, I can click on it. It's going to go ahead and open that document in a viewer for me, and I can see what we have there. I can continue to have a threaded conversation about this. So Jerry reviewed the document for me once I tagged him in it. So I can even come over here and say, thanks, Jerry. And it's going to, as I start typing his name, it's going to let me tag him in the content. So he's going to get a notification as he has Teams running that I'm having this conversation with him. But then also other people in my team, you see that further down I'm having a conversation with Jeff. Jeff may have missed this, but he'll be able to come back in and through the persistent chat, see that Jerry and I have had a conversation about this document and be able to see our notes. We notice that this is called, an operation escalation support. If I come over here and click on files, you see that this document is stored here in this library. But other things you may notice across the top, similar to what we have inside of SharePoint, and they've also announced at Ignite that coming soon, we're going to get the full experience of the document library inside of this Teams tab. But I have all my documents here. So whenever I'm uploading a document into the site or into Teams, it's putting it into this document library for me. And I can even come over here, say open in SharePoint, and that's going to open my document library for me. And here you have that classic SharePoint experience. So whether I'm going to the content directly from SharePoint or I'm getting it from Teams, it's still a single source of content. Through the conversation threads, I can continue to have and start new conversations. I can also add additional content. So maybe there's another document that we're working on. I can come over here and I can say upload from my computer, and I can very simply go out to where I have a document and upload that on the site. I can have a conversation about it. Here is our latest report. I can add this here. Now my entire team can see it and we can have that out there. When I come over here to files, I'll see that that document has been added here. So it's a great experience, very simple to use. Most people want to have these conversations about the documents, but I'm not having a conversation about a document where I'm sending an email and attaching a file. I'm actually having a conversation here that people using Teams are going to get a notification if I message them that there's a new file here for them to look at. There's also other things to make my life easier inside of Teams. When I talk about it being that hero experience, it's bringing all of my content together. So here we have a wiki where I can go in and keep for the cloud. We can have that. We also have something for project task. Now this is what I was talking about with Planner, where you can go in and you can keep your project tasks. So this is actually stored inside of Planner, but it is available inside of Teams here through the use of a tab. Now when I say a tab, I can come over here and click on my plus sign, and here are all of the different tabs that are available for my team. Now I can come down here and I see that there's many, even cross-platform tabs. So if I was using some of these other applications, I could also integrate them into my Teams tab. So SurveyMonkey, if I was using something like that, if I was using YouTube or something like that. But again, it's controllable by the Teams admins, so your users can really only access the things that you want them to access. So we're going to come over here and click on some of the different things that we have. Here are the Microsoft ones. So you see I can link to Power BI. This would allow me to display any Power BI reports that I had. I can do Microsoft Stream. So if I had videos that the organization was sharing, I could put them in here. People could easily access them. So that means they could navigate directly to the product to access it, or they could just access it as they're doing their day-to-day job. I can also put documents in there and SharePoint pages. So an example of a SharePoint page is I added our news site here. So news is a great way inside of SharePoint for you to give your users some very simple communications. So we can have a page, we're going to put content on it, and we're going to drive people into those pages to get more information. Every time I post a new news site on my team site or a new news page on my SharePoint team site, it's also going to show up inside of Teams. So again, whether I want to have this highly interactive experience, this hero experience as I'm working with my teams, I can do that inside of the Teams client, or I can also go into my SharePoint site, which I'll open here, and I have all these basics of collaboration again. All right, so you see the same news that is displayed here on my SharePoint Teams site is the same news I'm getting inside of Microsoft Teams. So when a lot of people ask me, do I need to use Teams? Shouldn't I be using SharePoint? What about these tools that we've already used? Really, Teams is a tool that you can now implement that is going to enhance the SharePoint experience and make for a greater experience overall. It's going to make working with your users a nicer experience for them, but they can still go back to the sites as well, to the content that they are already used to using and working with. All right, so now inside of the SharePoint site, we can show that we have some of these great features that we can use as well. We have our Teams news that's here, so I can simply come in, and if I had new news I wanted to share with my team, I could post a new news post here, or I could even post a news link. And what the news link is a way for me to link out to another news site. So instead of having to copy, maybe there's a great news article that Microsoft posted, or maybe there's a security bulletin that I want to share, I can just link to it by adding the URL, and it's going to roll it up and show me on the site. This one right here is an example of that. So I click on that, it takes me out of my environment, and it takes me to an Azure site. Okay. Then I can also have pages inside of SharePoint where I can add content. So I can come in here, click on any one of these pages, and I'm going to get to see different elements of content. So I'm going to see, this is a page with text, and then it's got a page viewer, a file viewer web part on the page that allows me to go through an entire PowerPoint deck. So I'm able to very easily share data and share content with users, driving them to the things that are the most important. Again, if we go back to the home site, I'm also able to add some easy links for people if they wanted to click on things and drive directly into content. I can add some quick links there. And if you notice, any of the documents that I had uploaded into Teams are available inside of my document library as well. They're available inside of a folder that matches the channel that they were inside of Teams. So if I click on General here, you'll notice these are all of the documents that we saw while we were over inside of Microsoft Teams. I can also see an activity feed. And so the activity feed is going to show me all of the things that are happening on the site. It's going to show me when I did it, who did it, and how long ago they did it. So 5 minutes ago I was editing this document, and 4 hours ago I was creating these pages. This is going to roll up, and the more people you have on the site, the more activity you're going to see. Now what's great about this site experience that I'm showing you here is I have done no customization to it. The out-of-the-box template is going to provide me all of this content. So I simply had to go to the home page, start adding my news, start adding my links and my documents, and as I was doing that, the activity feed started to complete. So with zero training and not a whole lot of planning and effort, you're able to provide users with these tools that they're able to very quickly and easily go and start to use to utilize for their team. All right, and finally we want to jump into Planner. And so Planner is going to be a product from Microsoft that allows us to go in and build plans. There's a couple of different things that I can do. I can go into the Planner Hub, which is going to show me all of the projects that I have tasks assigned to me, or I can drill into some of these different boards that have just, specific to a project. So this is the demo site that we're working on here, and I see I have different tasks assigned to me. I can go in and control what about the tasks, so I can click on it, I can give it descriptions, due dates, I can say what level of information do I want to show on the card that's visible, so making it visible to everyone at just a quick link, and I can make assignments and set progress and different things here, so I can come over here and update that this task is in progress, different things like that. I can also come over and maybe this one has been completed, it's been assigned to both Jerry and I'm going to mark it as completed. So in doing this, I can then also come over and see things like charts and a schedule. So this is exactly how it works out of the box. There's no customization or any configuration that I have to do. I'm just able to start using these features. And then I can also go in and see, based on a schedule, when my tasks are actually taking place. And that's just going to be displayed for me. But going back to wanting to embed that into other experiences, you can see that I can go back to my SharePoint site and I can very easily create a plan or create a page that has that planner on it. So I can come over here. Let's see if I have a page right here. Nope, that's the wrong link. well, let's just make it easy. I'm going to create a page, show you how I can do it. So I'm going to come over here and create a page. I'm going to go ahead and call this Project Plan. I'm going to save that, make sure I have it all set up. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add my web parts to it. So I'm going to click on adding that. All right, so I have my planner web part. I can add that in here. And it's going to automatically come up and be associated with the plan that is assigned to my team. So it's going to know that that's probably the plan that I want to display. It's going to show that there. I can even come over and do some creative things here where I'm showing different views of the same web part. So I can come back in, I can add this web part. All right, let's see. I can add this web part here, and then I can go over and maybe I want to show my charts. So I have this all super simple, and then I can even come up and add a graphical image for us. So I can come over here and just do a search. If I go out to a web search, it's actually going to give me some great backgrounds already that I can pick and choose from. Probably want to do something more along Teamworks or technology or something like that. So we can, come over, pick anything that's going to make sense for what we're doing. And it's going to be added to my page for me. Now I can publish this, and I have a great way to show the project plan to people on the site. It's going to actually ask me naturally if I want to do things like add it to the navigation or if I want to post it as news or even email it out. So I'm going to go ahead and post this on news on my site. Okay. Or I'm not. All right. We'll try that again in just a few minutes. Post that over there. I can add it to navigation. So there we go. Here's my project plan. Showed up as navigation. And then back on my home site, I can easily get to it. Okay, and we even see that it did, even though it gave me an error, showed up as a news article on my page. So I see that there, and if I was to go back into Teams and refresh this tab, you're going to also see that the news article has been posted there. So these are just some of the super quick and easy things that you can do directly out of the box with using Teams and SharePoint. So hopefully you've seen from this demo just a couple of quick and easy ways how you could get users working, whether they want to come in and have these threaded conversations, host meetings, really have a conversation that can be carried throughout the teams. There's great mobile applications so that they can also access all of this content. So anywhere they're on the go where they can still get to their accounts, they can get in and get this content. So these are just some quick and easy examples of things you can do with the simple collaboration stack that we have. Everything I've shown you is out of the box, and there's some great tools that I hope you can see how they'd work great for your users. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and he's going to lead us in a panel on simple collaboration inside of Office 365.
Thanks, Jen. Like I said in my intro, our customers are so excited to have these new tools like Teams. Aaron, I'm going to come to you with my first question. So many of our customers had already deployed OneDrive. Many of them had already deployed SharePoint. Now we're layering in this incredibly rich technology and functional specifications around Teams. How are you seeing customers adopt it? How are you seeing them map various different business processes to the various different tools? i.e., I want completed documents here, I want team collaboration here, I want documents that I'm sharing here. How are you seeing customers work through that?
Well, Steve, right now, what a lot of my customers are doing is they're using Teams for like ad hoc and organic projects a lot. That's I think where its primary focus has been with most of my customers right now. So they have a task force, some new project is spun up for their agency, and they are using that as a place to store their documents, store their conversations, instead of the roundabout email, the reply all scenario. I mean, as you know, the best time to learn about the pizza party for your distribution list is being on the distribution list when the notice comes out, right? So if you show up late to the party, and you join that DL late, you're not going to know. You're not going to have that persistent history of what's going on. So when you show up at the office and you're still there at 4 o'clock on Friday, you wonder where everybody is. Then you go and Monday rolls around and people say, "Oh, did you get that that notice? We were over at at Bob's at the pizza place." And you're like, "No, I didn't." that's really one of the great things about Teams is that that persistent chat and that collaborative environment. Because again, if you weren't part of the distribution list when you came in, you don't have a way to really regain that knowledge. So Teams is one of those great places to be able to maintain that historical value, that historical knowledge, and go back and see stuff that you may have missed. Maybe you were on vacation, maybe you hadn't joined the org yet. So for project-based things, that's where I find a lot of my customers are getting a lot of value out of it. The ability to, instead of, again, emailing around a document, and you have, document one, document 1.old, document one, and so instead of seeing all that, we are all very familiar with that sprawl. Teams, as Jen mentioned earlier, uses that SharePoint infrastructure, so you have the ability to put a document in a spot and continue working on it, see the revisions, go back to that revision history if somebody makes a mistake, or if you want to go back and see what the changes were prior to you getting a hold of it. Any of those scenarios are enabled by using the Teams environment. That's what I've seen most of my customers get the most value out of, and then being able to extend that outside their walls. So I have some state agencies right now that are working to use Teams as that platform to be able to share documents with vendors, with partners. I have a state government that is using it for their criminal justice system to be able to collaboratively work on inmates, to be able to share information between the prison system, maybe family members or medical professionals outside the normal state boundaries.
So, and Billy, welcome to our panel. This is Billy Schwetz. Billy is a director in our federal practice at Planet. And Billy, you and I were talking earlier, you're seeing Teams be really, really beneficial in smaller teams and dev teams. So why don't you talk a little bit about how your organization is using it, and then, of course, how you're helping other people adopt it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we use it a lot in our dev teams as a way to keep, and infrastructure teams as well. We keep track of kind of those conversations where we're planning new projects and planning out architectures and trying to make decisions where you have a team of 8 engineers that all have varying opinions on something, and you need them to actually work that through. We use Teams for all of that because you can have that conversation. I can jump in and be like, oh, this is where this went, and you see that throughout the history of it. You can also connect, as Jennifer pointed out, Planner to it, so I can actually create a sprint board for all of them all through Teams and do those components. And we do that in the federal space, while our federal clients aren't always on it yet because it's still coming to some of those GCC high locations, but we're introducing that to them by doing it in their space and getting them used to all of those collaboration components.
Bobby.
Yes, sir.
All right, you get the hard question here. So in the shield, right? In last year's summit, we talked a lot about Skype and Skype voice and the Skype client, and of course now that's transitioning over to Teams. So talk to us a little about Microsoft's perspective on that client change and what Microsoft's asking us to do, or our customers to do, as they get ready to move from Skype to this Teams client.
Absolutely. From a supportability standpoint, Skype is always going to be supported, right? Because there's no end date yet. It's not being deprecated. So if there's client that puts heavy investment on Skype for Business servers, that's still going to be continually supported. So there is no end date. I think when people start to talk about, equate things to like InfoPath, SharePoint Designer of the world, people start to claim like, oh my goodness, I'm losing my baby, I'm losing my good stuff. We know and we recognize Skype for Business is very much a big area of investment for a lot of these government agencies, commercial area, a lot of public sector organizations. So we're very supportive of that. There's a lot of hybrid component, and then that's when we start to talk about transition and how we can help you unlock some of the things in Teams. From an investment standpoint, the product investment in terms of vision and where we're going and the new things that are coming out. If we're thinking about just not very recently Ignite announcements, right? We do a lot of big conferences like, here's like 15 new things that would unlock your productivity. All those new features and rollout roadmap items are going to be now Microsoft Teams focus. It doesn't mean that Skype for Business is going away. We still are very going to support it, but new things, new security things for our focus, new productivity focus items are always going to come to Teams. So what we're in the process of, including Microsoft, right, we're throwing ourselves in there in the ring in terms of how do we help our 100,000, 200,000 staff members and partners that we work with also go through that transition so that we can kind of take notes, making sure that we're hitting all the check marks in play before we put our customers and clients actually through that transition as well. Teams, as we have noted here through the panels, is just very exciting. There's a lot of really good productivity scenario that it unlocks, but at the same time it's new. People are not always receptive to change. We understand that. So the challenge, I think, in the next quarter, year or so is really trying to, number one, push that value and help client understand why they should transform along with us. At the same time, not also then help them make that move and transition over to Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, that's great. So I have yet to talk to a customer who's not unbelievably excited about Teams, right? They have questions about how they can best adopt it, and like I said, again, best use it. How do they map it to business processes? Dave, tell us about your customers. How are they looking at Teams?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there is a little bit of concern. First of all, the timing was, when is Teams coming out? Now that it's here, there's a lot of excitement. I think what I've seen is for customers who have already made an investment and adopted SharePoint, they're taking a little bit longer to look at, okay, how do you fit Teams into that overall approach? But for the customers who haven't really leveraged SharePoint, either for document management or as an intranet portal or a means of communicating with their end users, Teams provides that kind of fabulous out-of-the-box experience where each department can really choose to use Teams in the structure that they see fit and best fit their organization, their business. So, the fact that persistent chat is right out of the box, the fact that your documents are there and tied to it, the fact that you can reference people in persistent chat and get access to the gal and be able to kind of pull them into the conversation, and that notifies you by email, hey, your coworkers are talking about you on Teams, right? They've done a great job of kind of encouraging people to go to Teams, and it provides an infrastructure right out of the box. So for those customers who have been working and struggling trying to figure out how best to collaborate, haven't really invested in SharePoint, Teams is right there for them.
I'd love to kind of drill in a little bit on that, Jeff, if you don't mind. If you just heard and caught on just a few minutes that we're talking, right? I mean, Jen was showing some things in terms of event planning around the GovCloud Summit and how to use Teams around that with the SharePoint kind of running on the back end. Aaron, you were talking about, hey, inmates collaborating with folks outside, which is like mind-blowing, right? Like folks being able to actually collaborate with folks outside of your tenant, right? And then, Jeff, you were talking about, hey, there might be department-specific. Billy, you were talking about there might be DevOps. The whole point is we're all in discovery of knowledge, right? We're all in discovery of content. And if you remember, Jen's kind of walking through a different scenario of going through Planner, going to Teams, going to SharePoint. It almost like doesn't even matter anymore because you're working with each other. You're unlocking productivity. You're looking for knowledge. And by the way, are we allowed to talk security? In this
Sure, of
session?
course. Talk security.
You can comply things around the Teams itself, right? The whole idea is that whether you're using SharePoint, Teams, Planner, everything actually loops back to what we call Office 365 groups, right? So in the context of what Jen was showing through the demo is that GovCloud Summit demo is an Office 365 groups. Compliance is on top. Permission membership is on top. You do it at the top level. You put the compliance and policy at the top level, and everything else, whether it's conversation threading, whether it's chat, whether it's video sharing, we don't care. Those are institutional knowledge. It should be governed the same exact way, and folks should be able to share knowledge the same way as well.
It's almost like we talked about this, but we actually didn't. But I was going to turn that back over to Aaron and say, in your role as a collaboration business productivity specialist, right? Like I started off the dialogue by talking about Teams because that's what the session was about, and it's a product that people are excited about. But this is really a collaboration story, right? It is a knowledge management. We're going to dig in. We've got institutional knowledge. We want to use that knowledge to the best of our ability, make it as productive as possible, and then for the pieces that we need to share, we want to share it outside of our organization. So talk about that, because that's really the story here, right?
Right, and I think that's a really great part of the story is, as Bobby mentioned, Teams is built on top of Office 365 groups. So all of the pieces and all the features that you had with the groups, again, the idea of the distribution list type of functionality, the persistent storage type of functionality. Teams is really just a wrapper around that with plugins for different API components and pieces that really just enable a whole bunch of extensibility to be able to develop your own tools and plugins, use ones that we bring, use ones that partners bring, and again, since it's, again, based on an Office 365 group, things that you used to be able to do with Office 365 groups, such as adding external users to it to be able to participate in an Office 365 group, you can do the exact same thing with Teams. So when you add somebody, I want to invite you to my awesome, really wicked team that talks all about pizza recipes.
Pizza party.
Pizza party, right? So I can do that. I can create a team in the Microsoft environment, and I can add everybody here, including you guys at Planet. You guys can all come and join and have access to the SharePoint document library, where I'm storing all my awesome recipes, and you can have access to the planner that I'm going to create that has the schedule of when all these pizza parties are going to take place. So all of that is available. I can make you members of it. I can make you owners of it. You can do really anything that you could do with a group, you can do with a team, only better.
And so with M365 then, I can audit it, I can make it secure, I can make it role-based or those types of things with M365?
Well, I think a really important aspect to add on top of that is because again it's built on Office 365 groups, which is messaging and SharePoint components. All of those pieces all roll up into our existing e-discovery platform. So when you're talking about compliance from the aspect of being able to preserve and maintain and hold content, or the aspect of being able to discover content, both of those are still available. You can scope your searches in e-discovery to content stored in Teams, just like you could previously with content stored in SharePoint sites or content stored in mailboxes. Really the same tools that people have been already using for the last 2 or 3 years to manage those Freedom of Information Act requests, or any other HR-based discoveries, or any other type of content discoveries in their organization. They can continue to leverage those existing tools and that existing knowledge against Teams.
So it's awesome. Billy, Dave, tell me a little bit, be the voice of the customer for us in here. What are your concerns? If you're the voice of the customer, you hear all this great stuff from Aaron, from Bobby. What's your concerns as the voice of the customer?
So we get a lot of questions about the security side of it, and how can you track who's doing what when you're doing all this? I was actually going to bring up one of the best things we've been able to use it for is distributed team collaboration as well. So, and there's a lot of fun social things that are in Teams that you don't get from Skype for Business that helps build that team environment. But on the flip side of it, you have somebody posting a really hilarious meme, and then suddenly somebody from HR security is like, that's not okay. So it's a lot of the concerns have been around that. And then also just adoption and governance and how do you manage it, right? Like we were talking about before, it's you have the suite of tools that are now interconnected, but you have a user that doesn't understand all of that. Like they're not a Microsoft person, they don't understand how all those things work together. How do you bridge that knowledge gap and teach them how those tools and things operate together?
I think the other challenge is because Teams is so new, the methodology or the consistency of approach is not really settled. An organization may not have, from team to team, the same consistent approach. And that becomes a little bit problematic from a collaboration perspective, because teams today are not just a group of people in the same department. We have a lot of cross-collaboration of teams. And so within your team deployment approach, you want to have some level of consistency of approach so that when you're moving from project A to project C, you can look at teams and get a pretty general good overview of what's been going on in that team. To Aaron's point about the fact that it shows this tremendous history, as long as everything's kind of consistently in the same place, or that the file structure, we're a project-based organization. If we were to approach teams very different from project to project, that might drag on our consulting engineers being able to consistently find the information they need where they expect it to be from one team site to another. So I think consistency of approach is the other biggest challenge that we're dealing with.
So when we look at our organization about how it is we want to help our customers adopt this collaboration stack now, this ever-changing collaboration stack, we're taking an approach of saying, hey, let's do some workshopping around defining what tools we want to use for what, where that makes sense for that particular organization and their mission. And then from there, we're building governance around that, right? And so I'd just love to get anybody's thoughts on that strategy and where you're seeing something different or the same and where you're seeing it be effective.
So some of the things that I've helped a lot of my customers with, things that my customers have been concerned about lately, are, anybody can create a group, anybody can create a team, and how do I know if this team is associated with the engineering group? How do I know if this team is associated with the marketing group? Those are pretty common questions that I get, as well as, what if we stop using that group after a month or 2 months or after a year?
What if the pizza parties aren't happening
I know,
anymore?
right? So what do I do with that stale content if the people who, this project has ended? How do I manage that so I don't end up with thousands and thousands of unused groups? Those are probably the two most common questions that I get. And we already have an answer to that. Inside of Azure AD Premium, we have the ability to do both group naming policies. So you can take things like department values or company values or some other values that are stored inside of Azure AD and make those part of the team name. So if I'm going to create Aaron's Pizza Party, and we know that I'm part of the sales organization, I could make it say sales-Aaron's Pizza Party, things like that. And if we want to make sure that we're only keeping the freshest things there, if it gets abandoned after a year or two, we can call that information. We can use Office 365 group expiration policies to sit there and notify the owner of the group at a certain period of time. Hey, we've noticed you've had this group for a year. Do you still need it? The user doesn't have to know anything about groups, anything about teams. They just have a message that says, do you want to keep it, yes or no? They can click yes, and the lifetime of that group is now extended. So there's a lot of ways for us to put a policy around to automate some of the standards and some of the cleanup tasks that really often get neglected, especially in on-premises environments. I've seen a lot of my customers' legacy environments suffer from unused users, unused groups, unused file shares, all this stuff that kind of sits there.
And there's a cost to that.
Absolutely there is.
Right? There's a cost to that. Organizational costs, and in some cases, financial costs with SharePoint storage and other type things that are real considerations.
Right. So being able to use some of those policies that we have built in to help govern and manage the life cycle of your data, I think those are big things, big wins for our customers that they don't currently have access to in their on-premises environments.
And so I just come back to that and say those are great examples, but ultimately it's, hey, and I don't think we're getting pushback on that because our customers are asking for it. They want to understand the process how do I align my tools, and then they certainly want to have some sort of governance and way of making sure that they are managing to that. So Jen, getting to you, all this is great. We've built groups, we've built governance policies and compliance policies, and now we've decided what tools we want to use, and then we built these policies. What about the end users?
Well, what I've seen with teams, especially in groups, is they just need to know where do I go to do what. And half the time they want an easy way to work, but a lot of it's about educating them. So getting in front of them, giving them pieces of information on a continual basis. So you can either do that by creating large communication plans, having strategies. You can do things like Evolve 365, which is a training platform where you can go in and continually send out campaigns. So here's Teams, and it's not how do I upload a document to Teams, how do I use OneDrive. It's more why do I use OneDrive? When am I going to use OneDrive over when am I going to use Teams? And how can my life be better in Teams? And going in and creating those scenarios and then guiding users based on those scenarios, they're going to adapt onto them, then use them often, and then you're just going to continue and keep growing. And to your case in point where groups work different ways and teams work different ways, we might focus in a campaign on one team and say, hey, here's how you guys can use this, and then we're going to take the learnings that we got from how your team is using it, and now you're going to impact the rest of the org.
And you can incorporate that right into the Evolve 365 training platform?
Yes, we can incorporate it right into that. And so give people the training and continually give them the training.
Yep.
The environment's evergreen. Things are always changing. Last year we didn't have Teams. We're getting Planner in Q1, I believe is what you said. And so we've got all of these things. It's always changing. So we always need to be educating them on how do I pull it together to do my job. And we can do that. We understand their roles. We understand what they're doing. So we should build that training around that to encourage them to get those best end results.
And the structure of Teams allows you to, as you showed in your demo, the ability to add in additional capabilities for one team, but maybe keep them out for another team. So that's some of the layered security, some of that, the layered, structured approach to things. The Teams template, the Teams framework allows for that, and then you can train the end users who are
Right,
using
and there's
that.
going to be certain things like Billy was talking about infrastructure and dev teams. Well, they work totally different than marketing and planning teams. So a marketing team might have libraries with news pages and all of these great glorious photos and everything's wonderful, and a dev team is probably going to have a task list because that's what they want to do and that's how they think. But using these tools, we get the best of both worlds and meet the teams where they're at and make their lives easier. And so if we can get into those scenarios and really get that training around that scenario, it's not really going to be a matter of adoption because we're connecting the dots for them. We're saying, wow, we're making your life easier in this scenario. Here's all you have to do, and here's how easy it is.
I think the scenarios has been a key thing in the federal space because we've taken things outside of just IT and said, hey, here's a squad that's out in the field that's doing this type of investigation. And they use Teams to help figure that information out because we've shown them, hey, this is a problem you have to solve. Let me show you how you can solve it using these tools and products for it.
So we started this session discussing Teams, but what we really come to is we've got a collaboration story, right? And it's imperative that our customers that own this technology or considering owning technology understand that this is an unbelievable opportunity for them to choose the right tool underneath one collaboration story and make it secure. Jen, great job. Fantastic panel. Thanks, everybody.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Welcome this morning. Thank you for joining. Both our folks are great attendees on the East Coast and in particular those on the West Coast that got up early with us this morning. A great turnout. My name's Steve Winter. I'm joined by quite a few folks on the call, but Dave Riley, Bob Ballard is with us, of course. I think we're going to be joined by Pete Seidel as well from Planet. Pete's first panel. Wasn't on a panel yesterday, so welcome Pete and thanks for joining. Guys, we've got quite a few questions in here from our attendees, so I'm just going to go through the list here and we'll address them. Starting from the top, how long is the conversation history stored in Teams, and are you able to set retention policies towards the conversation history?
So I'll start with that. And by the way, I think there's a whole series of questions that have to do with this, right? So if you look at the questions that have come through, there's a bunch around retention policies, et cetera. So I'll just walk through sort of where things are today and where they're headed, right? So first of all, any files that are stored up there in a Teams environment are actually stored in SharePoint and therefore subject to whatever retention policies you have in place or set inside tenant-wide or based on site collections or however you might set them. So that's all managed through the tenant settings, the compliance center, SharePoint, and regardless of whether they're created in a team or not. So there were some questions around that. Secondly, the actual conversation history, if we're talking about persistent chat within channels, today there is no sort of enterprise archive records management retention policies that can be applied to channels or the persistent chat contained within them today. That is on the roadmap. I keep hearing talk about it, possibly even we're almost to the end of the calendar year now, within the next 6 months. I keep hearing about that being a targeted item. There is no specific delivery date on the roadmap for that yet that I'm aware of. And then finally, when it comes to conversation history on one-to-one chat, I'm actually, that stuff is still managed the same way it was in Skype for Business, right? So that goes into conversation history, into email. You look at it in your mailbox, you'll see it in Outlook. Those policies are applied through, your mail retention policies, et cetera, and those are stored there. So hopefully there was about 5 or 6 questions in that whole series around compliance things. Hopefully that answers those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any further questions, pop them in the pod window. Moving on, I think this is a great one here. Please share your thoughts on the management of O365 groups required for creating teams. Is this something that should be open for everyone in the enterprise to create, or will that become chaotic? Should it be requested and managed by admins?
So I don't know if anybody else wants to start, but I certainly have some thoughts on this too. But I don't want to be the only one talking.
Feel free, Bob. Then I'm sure Dave and Pete will have some thoughts as well.
All right. So I'll just start off of sort of, we have a lot of different kinds of customers. So we've kind of had a lot of different experiences with this. So whether it's groups or teams or together, in general, there's sort of three ways you can handle this, right? So one is you can say it's free for all. It's open to everyone, right? And if you're not prepared for it, it certainly can create, it can create a bit of a chaotic nightmare. There is some governance stuff that's been embedded into the product that helps a little bit to enforce some naming conventions based on department and some stuff that's come a long way there that wasn't in the original release of the product. So that's one model. The second model is, it's an IT-driven experience. We're going to sort of create the main channels. We're going to ask people to create groups and teams to fill out a help desk ticket or some sort of process and do it there. And then the third one is sort of a hybrid, which is we're going to create sort of departmental champions or owners just to have some sort of check and balance. And then there's one other thing that I've started to see, particularly in education customers and some organizations that want to lend towards I want people to create teams, but I also want them to understand their impact. We've actually have a couple of customers now that are requiring people that create teams to go in, one of them happens to be a ServiceNow, right? So they open up a ServiceNow ticket that forces them to watch a Teams training video. And then once they've completed that, they're moved to the group that allows them to create teams. So two things. One, it doesn't allow you to just immediately start without getting your team citizenship training. And then secondly, it requires you to invest 10 or 15 minutes of your time. So that takes across, people that are just throwing them out there for no reason. So to net it all out, I know I didn't actually say what we recommend. To net it all out, I think we're starting to see, so obviously the idea is that everyone should be able to create them. But I also, that's obviously the most open from a collaboration standpoint. What my recommendation would be to avoid is requiring, a full-on interaction with the help desk to create them, right? So, maybe it's assigning champions that within departments that can at least be a little bit of a human filter, or at a minimum, some basic workflow process. We have another customer that's built that in SharePoint that's created a workflow that just basically says, somebody looks at it and says, that's fine, and boom, they get added to a group that allows them to create teams. So those are, that's sort of where we are on this. My leaning is, I totally get why you don't want it wide open, but to try to get it as easy and as far pushed away from a total central control scenario is probably the best.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Bob. I mean, everything in moderation is a kind of a lesson I grew up learning from my folks. But, the reality is if you let teams kind of go untamed and allow it to be viral, you'll have, 19 different ways that Teams is deployed. And to some extent that's fine because you're enhancing and applying the collaborative tool to the given collaborative experience, the project or the group that needs to leverage it. I think where you mentioned that could get to be a little bit chaotic is that, when somebody moves from one team to another, if there's a completely different team structure and there's not the same tools in one team that there are in the other, then the user experience gets impacted. So I do believe that IT has some role to play in the deployment of teams just like they do in every other technology. But to your point, if they become too structured in their approach to teams, I think a lot of value is lost.
Yeah, and I think we only have 5 or 6 minutes left in this open Q&A, but I do want to drive home, Bob, that I believe you and I were talking offline, and you have a customer that's automating the process of end users requesting teams, and then potentially that being approved by the division or group within that agency, by that champion, right? That kind of thought process.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and if I'm correctly, what you were telling me is that it's also managed by governance rules. The governance rules are also incorporated in that tool set.
Right. So and by the way, you can also have sort of different classes of people applied to this workflow as well. So in one example, it was in education. There's a different set of rules for students creating teams, right, than faculty and staff, right? In regular government customers, there might be an example of, hey, if my team is departmental in nature, right, then I'll let you create it, or I'll let the departments decide where they want to create it. But if it's sort of an enterprise team, then I might actually require you to go through some workflow, et cetera. So there's a couple of different scenarios there.
Okay, terrific. So we only have like 5 or so minutes, so if I can kind of ask everybody to keep the answers relatively brief. But there's a question here about costs as it relates to teams in general. Excessive cost if you open up to anyone, or their cost considerations that we want to ouch for. Specifically, obviously, we have SharePoint storage potentially with some of these things, Exchange storage. I mean, so I don't know if anybody wants to jump in on the cost considerations.
Is that going to be me again?
Yeah.
Sure. So there's a just to kind of get to the point. I know we got about 2 minutes. The short answer is, so the teams, there's a special site collection for teams, right? That's actually kind of a hidden site collection. All of them go under there. They actually don't get incorporated into calculating your consumption of SharePoint storage space. Initially, they did. That created a couple of customers to lose their minds around having it opened up, et cetera. Microsoft actually sort of hid that site collection so that stuff does not count against your overall tenant storage. So there isn't a big cost consideration concern around kind of letting people create content in teams.
And is that the same for groups, Bob?
Yeah, it is this. It is the same for groups. Yeah, so the teams and groups fall into that hidden site collection.
Okay. I want to address, before we run out of time here, I want to address some of the planner questions. So I guess in general, if somebody wants to address the high level differences between project and planner, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, so Steve, I'll take that one. Project Management Online is an enterprise project management tool. It is where you have a significant amount of resource management, detailed Gantt charts, project files are capable of being shared. I think the planner component within Office 365 is intended to be a kind of a lightweight task management and task distribution tool. It is, I wouldn't even call it project management light. It's intended to be kind of a light task assignment and task documentation tool to help and is integrated into kind of the collaborative stack there. So kind of completely separate tools. One, which is the high test, you really ought to have an enterprise deployment project for enterprise project management, whereas Planner is something I think can be done in a little bit more ad hoc, informal fashion.
Yeah, so I know that we don't have the planner experts on the panel on the Q&A panel right now. Does anybody in the panel know there's a question here about whether or not notifications appear in both the O365 for Project Online and Planner? I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. So there's a notification process for Planner, and there's a notification process for Project Online. As far as tasks being assigned, et cetera. There's no integration between the two of them. That's what the question was asking.
Yeah, and again, if we haven't answered that question, you certainly shoot us an email follow-up, and we'll get that question answered for you by some of our planner and project experts on the team here. So we're happy to answer those questions if we missed anything. And then there's a question, is there a way to export the persistent conversation chats and files from a team project into a single repository to be archived?
I actually answered that in the chat window.
Okay, and you want to really quickly share it with everybody?
Yeah, there's a PowerShell script that can export channels. I've seen that floating out there. The key is, right, if there's no embedded way to have that run automatically on the channel archive, so you need to actually create your own sort of channel deletion process to make sure that runs in advance if you're going to do that.
Okay, terrific. But the last question, because again, we're running out of time here, but the last question, and I got this one through a private Skype, is of course around Skype end of life. So what do our customers need to think about around Skype end of life and how that's switching to Teams?
Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about that question. The big thing to consider is, normally when you have a product replacement from Microsoft, in general, right, it's like for like swim lanes, right? The big thing that I would say people need to consider, obviously there's a whole end user, most of the functionality, the gap is closing really quickly, and the functionality, there's not a lot of technical details about this, moving from one to the other. The biggest piece is there's an entirely separate piece of the product that doesn't exist in Skype for Business. In other words, there's no governance conversations when you deploy Skype for Business. You turn it on, you have some technical details to deal with firewalls and performance and all of those things, and you move on. When we have Teams, we have this whole collaboration component. We need to decide, A, am I going to enable it? B, what the end user experience is if I see this Teams client where 3/4 of the functionality doesn't work because I've disabled it. And then C, if I am going to enable it, I've got to get ahead of this to create, what am I going to do? Am I going to allow everybody to create team, all these questions that we've been asking on the panel today. So the big thing is, that transition actually becomes a governance Teams collaboration discussion, and whether I am going to enable it and what I'm going to do if I do.
Great, Bob. Terrific. Well, Dave, Bob, Pete, thanks. We're going to start our next session here in a very short period of time. This is session number 6. This is one that's, I'm really excited. I think the audience is going to get a lot of, and our attendees are going to get a lot of value out of. That is tools and tips for DevOpsSec using Microsoft tools. So please feel free to stay. Looking forward to it. I think that's going to start here in just a few minutes. Thanks, guys.